Today, I am excited to talk to you about the different heel configurations for roof trusses. Hi, I'm Chad Johnson. I'm with Truss Components of Washington. I've been in the truss industry for over 35 years. Let's get started. For starters, let's just do a quick definition of what a roof truss is. In its most basic shape, it's typically a triangle, and a roof truss makes up the shape of your roof. So they rest on the walls of your structure, whether it's a shed or a house or a school, and then they fill in the space between the ceiling and the roof. They're designed to carry the load of things like snow and wind, and they transfer that load out to the exterior bearings, and that load goes through the walls and down to the foundation. Roof trusses are typically made for residential and light commercial construction out of wood, such as 2x4s and 2x6s, and those wood members are held together by metal gusset plates that are designed specifically for roof trusses. When we talk about truss heels, there are three fairly common types. And the definition of a truss heel is the part of the truss that sits on the wall. So this essentially right here is the end of the truss sitting on the wall, and that's the truss heel. The most basic type of truss heel is what we'd call a standard heel. And in that case, the top cord of the truss comes right down to the top of the wall, essentially, sits right on the bottom cord. And so that heel is roughly the same height as whatever the top cord is made out of. So whether that's a 2x4 or 2x6. So there are some advantages to this standard heel, primarily cost effectiveness. This is the simplest truss heel to build, and it also, with its low profile, requires no additional siding on the house, that sort of thing. So for economy, this is the best truss heel to use. Now, this is what you'll typically see on uninsulated structures such as garages and sheds, or many other structures that have insulation requirements that don't require a taller heel. So in any truss roof, especially in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to be required that there be room for ventilation. And so insulation is going to need to start at least an inch below the top of the truss, which is the bottom of the roof. And so, for instance, if that truss heel was 4 inches tall, and then we need that inch for ventilation, then that means that at the most, our insulation is going to be 3 inches deep at the outside. So a con of this type of roof truss heel is that the insulation is minimized as it gets to the outside of the wall. Also, because we're starting at a low height at the outside of the wall, it limits to some extent the attic space up in that roof. Now, if you're not trying to utilize that attic space, not really a con. So to recap, the pros of a standard truss heel are simple design, cost effective, works for most building type. The cons are it limits the depth of the insulation at the outside and potentially limits the attic space. The second common truss heel that we would see is what we call a raised heel. So again, we've got our bearing wall with our truss sitting on top of that, but in the raised heel configuration, the top cord or the rafter on the truss is held up off of the bearing surface to an extent specified by the design drawings. The reasons we would do a raised heel are a couple. Some pros of a raised heel are that, remember we were talking about the ventilation requirement? Well, we can get our ventilation space above a much deeper bed of insulation, And so if you're in a cold climate or if you're in a jurisdiction where the insulation requirements are high, you have much more space for that insulation to go all the way to the outside of the wall with a raised heel. Also, a raised heel provides more attic space. So if you were going to put a room in attic, for instance, if it was a bonus room style truss, you can get a taller room in that raised heel configuration. Some cons of the raised heel: it's a little bit more complex. It has more pieces at the outside of the truss, which is going to be more material and more labor. Also, the additional siding is required because we now need to cover up the end of that truss. Additionally, blocking requirements, those need to be specified by the building designer, but sometimes with a raised heel, in order to transfer the loads from the roof down into the walls below, some more stringent blocking requirements will come up. The third type of truss heel that we're going to talk about today is what we call a cantilevered heel, and that is where the bottom cord of the truss extends out past the bearing wall. So in this case, that extension would create the overhang. It could be out covering a porch. It could just be the overhang that goes around the house, but it helps protect the sides of the house from weather and that sort of thing, because water, snow, whatever will continue to the outside of that overhang. So some pros of a cantilevered overhang are that it gives you a pre-framed backing for soffit material. It's a very clean look. If you have multiple roof pitches on your building, then the heel can be the same height all the way around that building, because the wall heights, the heel will be at the same height as the wall, and so you won't have concerns about a steep pitch overhang dropping your gutter line below a shallow pitch overhang, stuff like that. Additionally, talking again about that insulation, we can baffle the insulation for that air space, the ventilation, and still get a deep insulation bed out to the exterior bearing with that cantilevered overhang. Some cons of the cantilevered overhang: again, like a raised heel, it's a little bit more complex. There are more pieces to make it work, and then you are going to have to enclose that soffit because you won't want exposed trusses out beyond. But this is a great option for a clean look, deep insulation, more space in the attic if you're going to use that space, and yeah, very popular heel option here. So just to conclude, the three different heel types that we talked about are a standard heel, a raised heel, and a cantilevered heel. The pros of the standard heel are that it is cost effective, very simple to produce. The pros of a raised heel are that they allow for deeper insulation and more attic space. The pros of a cantilevered heel are that they provide more insulation, again, more attic space, and backing for an enclosed soffit. Thanks for watching this video today about different types of truss heels. If you'd like to learn more about roof trusses, here's a video on everything that you would need to know about roof trusses. And if you would like to know something about floor trusses, here's a video on the pros and cons of floor trusses versus other type of joist floor systems. Until next time.